and energy prices. More from Chris Woodward.
The proposed rule is an overhaul of the Obama administration's Clean Power Plan and increases the authority given to states to decide how and how much to regulate existing coal power plants. Attorney and former Missouri Public Service Commissioner Terry Jarrett.
As long as you continue to have tax-subsidized renewables and you have very low natural gas prices due to the fracking revolution, I think you're still going to see coal plants that will close in the future. However, I think this will save some of those plants, and the plants that remain will be able to run much more efficiently and be more price competitive. And so rather than the Obama's plan to get rid of all of the coal plants, what we will see is a very, very good and efficient coal fleet that can be used for the foreseeable future.
According to the New York Times, more than 200 coal plants have shut down since 2010, and another 40 plants have announced they will close in the years ahead. Few, if any, new coal plants are being built today. Still, critics of the Obama-era rules say they had a negative impact on entire communities built around coal mining, with job losses affecting everything from retail sales to school revenue. I'm Chris Woodward.
As Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing approaches, many Democrat senators are feeling the pressure to oppose him, while one senator is still undecided.
Democrats and activists on the left are still hoping to block the confirmation of Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh.
We are pro-choice. We are pro-Constitution. We do not believe that Kavanaugh is a good pick, and we're lifting up our voices with the people.
Protests over the weekend keep this issue on the front burner and to build pressure on Democrats in the Senate. But the momentum to confirm Kavanaugh may be building. So far, he's met with more than 60 senators, including at least a dozen Democrats, despite some refusing to sit down with him. Now, all of this will lead up to confirmation hearings beginning September 4th here on Capitol Hill. And one Democrat who's under a lot of pressure right now is Virginia's Tim Kaine.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com and on the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
My name's Antonio. My drinking had gotten to the point where I was embarrassed to go to the liquor store. But when I came to Teen Challenge, I finally broke the stronghold alcohol had on my life. Now I'm truly free.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
The United States is cutting more than $200 million in aid to the Palestinian Authority. The decision comes after a review of U.S. assistance to the PA. The funding had been in question for years due to the controversial policy known as pay to slay, a compensation plan for Palestinians who attack Israelis.
The Trump administration can act as a model for all 68 nations that give money to the Palestinian Authority and to UNRWA. Maybe that will happen.
What I would say to my Republican colleagues is please explain to voters at home why you allowed Planned Parenthood to continue receiving taxpayers' funds. Please explain to voters at home why anyone would trust politicians who continue to break their promises. Republican leadership has the power to unblock the amendment tree and allow the vote. The question is, what is more important to these Republicans, saving lives or spending money?
And now, Stacey Washington.
Oh, yeah. It's Monday, and we're back. And super excited to be here. So head over to urbanfamilytalk.com and American Family Radio, which is at afr.net. And check out the content over there. Hit the subscribe button. You know, do all that cool stuff. We have a jam-packed show for you today. First of all, we're going to stop talking about how we can stop mass shootings. We can stop mass shootings. We can stop school shootings. We can really make changes that are beneficial to this country. But you have to be willing to do something in order to get that done. So we're going to talk about that in the first segment. Second segment, we have Graham Allen. He's the host of Rant Nation on CRTV. He's coming on the show today. And then we also have in hour 2, Ron Coleman. He is an attorney and legal scholar. He's going to talk about Michael Cohen, campaign finance laws, and what to expect now that we've seen the complete shredding of the attorney-client privilege, which used to be sacrosanct and really something that could not be penetrated. And now we've seen that just out of the window. So we're going to talk to him about that in hour 2. You can get hour 2 right here, urbanfamilytalk.com, or if you're listening on the Urban Family app, you're just going to go straight through on that. So right now, let's dive into this thing. First of all, there's a connection between the whole rise of secularism, the fact that so many Americans, like 18% of Americans, claim that they don't believe there is a God, the idea that we can't have the biblical morals that this country was founded on in the public square anymore. If you look in public courthouses where the 10 Commandments, are on display, you see the Freedom from Religion Foundation running around saying, you can't tell people not to kill, you can't tell people not to covet. Why not? Why not tell people not to kill other people? Why not put that on the wall? So when people walk by it, it's a reminder. Hey, you're not in this court for nothing. You may be here to just pay a fine because you parked incorrectly, or you might be here getting prosecuted because you broke one of these commandments. Take heed. Don't be that person. We used to teach this to children in school. We used to let them read the Bible. Even if children weren't professing Christians, they had to read the Bible, because in order to read the Bible, in order to have an understanding of our culture, American culture, in order to have a good education, they had to read the King James. Reading the King James brought them into a place where they not only understood American culture, but they understood all of the world cultures, because the Bible is not just the Word of God, it's also a historical document that frames every aspect of our lives. And when we take that out, it's no wonder that everything gets jumbled. Without a frame, things are incomplete. Without a source to which we can refer back to and double check and say, is this correct? It's like trying to do a college course or trying to teach kids a particular set of curriculum without the textbooks. I don't mean teaching it from the online textbook. I mean no textbook at all, just some person who once learned it kind of winging it and leaving out all the good bits. That's what's happening right now. So the first thing we need to do is understand why it is that we've had the protection that used to be over our society as a whole. We've always had violence. As long as men are alive and they're at work someplace, present in a situation, you're going to have sin and you're going to have violence. But to the degree that we have it now, to the level that we have the kind of violence where people are mass shooting, you don't win a video game, go back and shoot the place up. This is not all coincidental or the modern times, or as the mayor of London, just a consequence of having people of different backgrounds living together. If you have Muslim immigration, you're going to have terrorism. No, I mean, yes to that, but no, it's not something we should expect to be a norm in our culture. So let's first tie this back to this continuing saga with defunding Planned Parenthood. In case you haven't heard, the House has already defunded Planned Parenthood. And if your finger is right over the knob and you're in your car or something like that because you don't want to hear about pro-life issues because you're sick and tired of that conversation, you think the Republicans should leave social issues alone, you're a part of the problem. The reason we have the problems we have is because we're not standing on the Republican Party platform and screaming out from that platform like a beacon saying, come hither, this is what we believe, this is what the way we govern when we're elected, this is our platform document. It's who we are, it's what we believe, it's how we roll. If we were to do that as a people, as Christians, if the Republicans would do that as a party, we would see many, many things in this country change. So hold on a second. We're going to get through this. It's Senator Joni Ernst. She's a little bit of a hero in the Senate. She's a rock solid voter for issues that impact Christians, namely pro-life, things like that. She's here in 2015, because I could have gone further back, but I thought, why not just stick with the most recent history? 2015, she's talking about a bill to protect women's health and take the money that's given to Planned Parenthood and redirect it to the 33,000 community health care centers that staff OBGYNs, nurse practitioners, and actual doctors who they don't provide abortions, but they provide every other aspect of women's care, including mammograms, STD testing, and the like. Now, why is this important? Well, I'll let you listen to her first in number 4, and then we're going to get to the crux here.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we discuss an incredibly important topic. The recent footage depicting Planned Parenthood's role in the harvesting of organs, heart, liver, kidneys, of unborn babies is morally reprehensible and vile. The American people, Republicans and Democrats alike, are horrified by the utter lack of compassion shown by Planned Parenthood for these women and their babies. In fact, now Hillary Clinton is calling these Planned Parenthood images disturbing, and I agree. These videos are hard for anyone to defend and hit at the moral fabric of our society. What we are talking about is human life. Planned Parenthood is harvesting the body parts of unborn babies. I am so grateful for the hard and collaborative work of my colleagues to put forward this legislation. Importantly, in addition to defunding Planned Parenthood, our legislation ensures that federal funding taken from Planned Parenthood will be made available to other entities that provide health services for women, like community health centers and hospitals.
So why is that important? There's something she said there that's different than every other time a Republican has taken the podium and said that we need to defund Planned Parenthood. And the different thing that she said there is that after David DeLeiden of the Center for Medical Progress came out with his videos, it's hard to believe this was back in 2015. It's 2018. We haven't had rioting. We have had no buildings burned to the ground. We've had no 10 million woman march or 10 million men march on Washington, D.C., or at the headquarters of Planned Parenthood to protest them taking human baby parts that were aborted, and instead of disposing of them in biomedical facilities as they're supposed to, they sold the parts. And the videos are so graphic, it's a stab to your heart to watch them. And I've watched every one of them. I got to the point where I felt like I couldn't take it anymore, and I couldn't watch the videos anymore. And then I felt like this is our time. This is the time in which we live. And if I'm too weak to watch the videos, then I'm too weak to do anything about it. And so it was like actual physical labor watching the rest of them. But I did because I had to know exactly what's happening here. And it's real. And so, you know, all the propaganda that's been put out by Planned Parenthood about it's not true. A lot of Americans bought into that, not because they really believe it's not true, but because it is so much easier to say, I don't need to watch the rest of these videos because this is just propaganda. But the videos themselves, if you watch them, you know it's not propaganda. You know they're not edited. You know it's not, you know, graphics or any kind of deception. It's the truth. And it's what's happening in our country today while we're driving our talking minivans and, you know, pressing the buttons on our dishwashers and loading our washers and our dryers. And even some of us putting our clothes into folding machines and having the clothes come out folded like they're at a retail shop. While we're doing all of that and riding around on our ride lawnmowers, and while we have all of the technology at our disposal, the little talking cube that tells you what time it is and what the weather is, all of the computerization, all of the screens, all of the technology, the barbarism marches on. And it marches on with taxpayer funding. And that's what's important here, because if you want to tune out and say, I already am pro-life, I don't support this, I'm praying for the pro-life generation, I'm praying for the end of Planned Parenthood and the end of abortion in America, amen to that. That's great that you're doing that, but your tax dollars are still funding Planned Parenthood. And that is how we are all culpable in this. We will all have to answer, and that is why it has to stop. It's not about really repealing Roe versus Wade, which is a fantastic idea, and I wish and pray that that would happen. But the funding of Planned Parenthood and their abortion business is our responsibility because our tax dollars fund it. Now, Rand Paul has been a leader on this for years. And while he and I don't match up on the foreign policy all the way, I have to say on the pro-life issue, he's been the warrior we need. We just need 50 more of him. We need 57 more of him. So he says, this is just last week, he said that Republican leaders blocked his amendment to defund Planned Parenthood. And you have to hear this because as you're listening to this, you're going to hear a few things. We'll unpack it afterwards. It's number 5.
Planned Parenthood ends the lives of 320,000 babies each year. That's about 900 babies every day. Planned Parenthood receives over $400 million of taxpayer money. The government, with a wink and a nod, tells us that Planned Parenthood doesn't spend the money on abortions. But everybody knows that the taxpayer is really cross-subsidizing Planned Parenthood's abortion mills. My amendment would end funding to Planned Parenthood. My amendment is already included in the House version. And yet, my amendment is now being blocked by Republicans. Why would Republicans block a vote on defending Planned Parenthood? May surprise some, because so many Republicans go home and say they're against Planned Parenthood. But this vote could happen right now, today, if Republicans don't object. Now, everybody knows that Democrats love abortion and Planned Parenthood, more than life itself. But Republicans, many voters think that Republicans actually care about the unborn. Many voters think Republicans are really opposed to government-funded abortions. But the dirty little secret is that Republican leadership is blocking my amendment to defund Planned Parenthood. That's right. The Republican leadership has filled the amendment tree to block my defund Planned Parenthood amendment.
So what's important about that? That it's the Republicans. So we have 2 Republicans, the 2 female Republicans they're senators. This is all happening in the Senate. The House is good to go. This is happening in the Senate. We only have a 51 seat, 51 out of 100 of those seats are the Republicans. So in order to get something done, you have to either eliminate the filibuster, as has been recommended by American Family Association and American Family Radio, or you have to have some Democrats cross over. But if no Republicans are willing to strong arm some Democrats to come over to our side so we can get the 60 votes we need, it won't happen. And when we come in from the break, you're going to hear from Senator Rand Paul's own mouth. He's done the analysis based on the statistics of how many geniuses and doctors and et cetera, are born in this country, meaning born and raised in America. How many of those were aborting on a yearly basis through Planned Parenthood with your dollars and mine? Then we're going to have Graham Allen, who's the host of Rant Nation. We'll be right back.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, the very first day in Israel, when we're staying in Jerusalem, we go to the Mount of Olives. And it's there at the Mount of Olives we look out over the old city of Jerusalem. It's a spectacular sight. You've seen it in pictures before, but it's another thing to actually be there as we walk down from the Mount of Olives to the Garden of Gethsemane, and we pray there. It's going to be a wonderful time with brothers and sisters from around the country visiting the Holy Land, the land of Jesus. If you want information on this March 14th through the 22nd tour, just call us and we'll send you a brochure. Call 1-800-FAMILIES, F-A-M-I-L-I-E-S, option 5, and leave us your name and your address and we'll mail you a brochure. Or if you want to simply go online at twholyland.com, everything's there. twholyland.com.
Hi, this is Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. Some years ago, a good pastor friend of mine experienced burnout. Years of leading a growing urban church and the pressures of meeting the unique challenges of the people in this community took their toll. He was discouraged and in the grips of a paralyzing depression. He took some time off for rest and healing. Well, God used an unlikely man to encourage him. They had very little in common with one another. They differed theologically in many other areas, but my friend said that this man cared deeply about him and that God used him as a very significant part of his healing. Sometimes God speaks through people in situations we would least expect. I thought about this when I read Ezra chapter 6, verse 22. The work of the rebuilding of the temple had stopped. The people were discouraged. Morale was low. But listen to these words as they got ramped up again. And they observed the feast of unleavened bread 7 days with joy. For the Lord had caused them to rejoice and had turned the heart of the king of Assyria toward them to encourage them in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel. This unbelieving king says, I don't believe in your God, but I know that you were told to do this, and I want to remove every barrier, every hindrance to make sure that you're successful. Wow. God uses whomever he chooses, even pagan leaders of wicked nations. So keep your heart options open. You might be surprised at who God will use to lift your spirits and to give you what you need to keep going. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. God is a lot bigger than we think he is. He has what we need. It just may not be in the places we typically look.
Legacy Moment is a production of Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Global Ministries.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Surely Republican leadership doesn't favor abortion funding? The answer is a curious one. The truth is that Republican leadership favors bloated government spending more than they care about Planned Parenthood. This appropriations bill before us exceeds the spending caps by nearly $100 billion. Big spending Republicans fear that blocking funding for Planned Parenthood would derail their plans to greatly expand the welfare warfare state. So be it. The public has long known the Democrats are the abortion party. Now the public will know that many Republicans just give lip service to pro-life issues and really are more concerned with bloated government spending than saving lives. Of the 320,000 babies that Planned Parenthood will abort this year, about 6,400 of these babies would be geniuses. They would develop into geniuses if they were allowed to live. Perhaps one of these potential geniuses would have discovered a cure for cancer or Lou Gehrig's disease. Of the 320,000 babies aborted by Planned Parenthood every year, about 1,000 would become doctors, 1,500 would become engineers, 1,200 lawyers, 3,400 teachers, and 400 pastors. But all of that potential is lost each year as a consequence of Planned Parenthood.
And so if that doesn't make you sit up and really think about what we're doing and who we're electing, who we're sending to Washington, D.C. to represent us, I'm not sure what can. If the videos don't do it for you and that doesn't do it for you, the actual breakdown and analysis of what kind of treasure we're allowing Planned Parenthood to parse out like car parts and sell for their own profit, bloodthirsty lunatics profiting off of the death of human babies. Well, I got nothing for you. I mean, I'm not sure what else wakes you up. Maybe, I'm not sure. Do you need a good smack? What do you need? And then what do we need to do? We'll talk about that in the third segment, and we'll take your calls. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Graham Allen. He's the host of Rant Nation on CRTV. Graham, thanks for joining the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, it's good to talk to you. I'm really excited to hear your take on so you're an 11-year U.S. combat veteran, first of all. Amazing. Awesome. I'm a veteran, but not a combat veteran. So thank you for your service. And you also have this perspective on Tom Steyer. He's running around the country. He's a billionaire. He's acting like he might run for the presidency and that he might kind of link arms with New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who actually thinks America was never great. What do you think would happen if those two teamed up?
Oh, I think that I'm probably going to just go dig a hole in the ground somewhere and bury myself at that point, like many Americans probably would. I think that, unfortunately, that just seems to be this narrative that's going around here lately. And I was having a conversation with someone last week, and I think it's because one thing that the liberal media tries to do is they try to take a word like great, and they try to change what great actually means. And what they're doing is they're confusing great with perfect. America was never perfect. It's not perfect now, and it will never be perfect. That doesn't take away that we live in the greatest country in the world. You can be great and not perfect. And so what they're doing is they're taking the meanings of words and they're changing it around to try to push this agenda that they actually have. And that agenda is to lie to the majority of Americans to make it seem like President Trump is not doing an amazing job across all fields. And that just seems to be the narrative that we're dealing with these days.
You know, you make an excellent point, because I think this is one of those situations, like if we take this and boil it down to another analogy most people will identify with, it's when you talk about your spouse. I can say my husband is fantastic. He's wonderful. He's an amazing husband. But if someone said, but is he perfect? I'd have to say no. Not because,
not.
Yeah, so he's perfect for me. And in many ways, I think he's the perfect father to our children. I mean, I wouldn't want anyone else to be my kid's father. But if you just said plain old, like yes or no, you only get to answer yes or no. Is he perfect or not? I'd have to say no, because he's a human being and he is incapable of being perfect. And so the same thing applies to our country. And the point you're making about words is, if we buy their definition, America was never great. America was never the good guy. America is not philanthropic. Americans don't protect every other westernized nation on the planet with our tax dollars and military might. We don't have the best system of government. We don't even have the best country to live in, yet everybody's trying to get in here. And when we go down that road, it leads to a lot of people thinking, well, we need to change the whole thing, when the reality is it's the best thing going.
Right. No, exactly. And I agree with you there about the spouse comment. I think my wife would have no problems letting you know that I am not perfect.
It's not, but it's not an insult.
What day you ask her.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be an insult to you. She would still only want to be your wife, but she would just be telling the truth. You're not perfect. I think it's we're getting this thing wrong. We're talking about the wrong stuff.
Right. Well, unfortunately, that's what the liberal media and the mainstream media tries to do, is they are attacking things and they're attacking words and narratives, and they're trying to twist it to mean something that it doesn't. And by doing that, they're trying to push their agenda. And their agenda is to try to make it seem like Trump's America, whatever that means. You know, where did we come up with that term in the first place? This isn't Trump's America. This is our America, and our America elected Donald Trump to be our president. That doesn't make it his America. Mm-hmm. America belongs to not one individual, period. It belongs to all of us. And, you know, so what they do is they try to create this false thing that there's Trump's America and Trump's the next Hitler, and he's going to bring upon the apocalypse and all this other kind of stuff, which, you know, if you read your Bible, I'm pretty sure the Bible says that, you know, everyone loves the Antichrist until he became the Antichrist. But, you know, that's neither here nor there. There's a lot of people that hate Donald Trump, so therefore, in and of itself, your argument's invalid, but that's a completely different topic for a completely different day.
Well, I don't know, Graham. It dovetails in nicely here on Christian radio. The same thing people said, well, Obama's the Antichrist. And I remember saying, I'm like, okay, wait, I liked you until you said that. What? He can't be the Antichrist because fully half the country hates him, so that's not it. He's not the, and he's not from the middle. He's supposed to be from an Eastern nation. He's not. We're a Western country. And America's not even mentioned in the end times. So, you know, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but it's definitely not. So this is an interesting thing that you just mentioned, that people keep calling Trump Nazi, right? So we're in the car listening to an Ann Coulter book, driving down to visit our older daughter who's in college. And the younger daughter says to me, I don't understand the Nazi comparison. She was like, am I wrong? Didn't Nazis kill millions of people? And I was like, yes, they did. So we talked about some of the things that the Nazis did, because I grew up in Germany and I've been to Auschwitz before. And so I talked about that and about how it was a systematic conversion of people's minds to get them to sing in church loudly and stand by silently as their neighbors were literally kidnapped in broad daylight and shipped off, and they never showed back up again, and their stuff was confiscated. And instead of people rising up against that, they'd been first normalized to the idea that those people weren't really people, and therefore it was okay for this to happen. And as we spoke, she said, well, wait, she said, I remember some of this from school, but she's like, I'm pretty sure Donald Trump's never killed anyone. So even if you don't like him, the Nazi comparison just goes too far. And I was like, well, you're probably smarter than, 30, 40 million people right in that moment, because people are still saying that, and it's just not a comparison that works.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I was having a similar conversation. And, you know, I'm terrible with the days start to run together. But we were having a conversation about that, claims of being a Nazi or claims of racism and claims of this and claims of that. And it's made by people that actually have no clue what it was really like back in those times, right? Or what it was really like for those people that actually had to deal with Nazis or actually had to deal with, segregation and things like that. And to me, comments of that nature prove nothing more than just sheer ignorance to what it is they're actually trying to even make a case in point about in the first place, right?
Yeah, it just throws the whole discussion out of whack to the point where it's not a discussion anymore, because one person is literally like, that's like me saying my house is as big as this galaxy. That's ridiculous.
Right.
If, that's not a conversation we can even have. A galaxy, not even as big as the planet, but the galaxy. So when you compare things like that and you make those kinds of crazy, wild statements, then people are questioning your mental, state as opposed to listening to what you have to say. And I know people have legitimate criticisms of the president. I don't mind that at all. What I mind is this idea that not only is he a Nazi, but we are all Nazi supporters or sympathizers because we prefer the form of government that he's trying to put together under duress with all of these investigations and everything.
Oh, yeah. Well, I hear it. I hear it daily. And unfortunately, I hear it from other Christians as well, is people will tell me, well, Graham, how can you claim to be a Christian and, have voted for or support Donald Trump? And my response to that is, how can you claim to be a Christian and think that Hillary Clinton would have been any better?
Yeah.
but also as Christians, we are called to, obey the laws of the land, respect the offices of which, our world and our society, has set appointed this infrastructure that we have. And so I think it's a very unchristian thing to do, to completely condemn the president on every single thing that the president does when he's the elected leader right now for our country.
I also think it's because this was something that happened when President Obama was in office, and it wasn't everyone. Obviously, it's never everyone. That's what's so crazy when people say everyone. No, everyone doesn't. But it was. There were some people on the right who really felt like, Barack Obama could do no right, and I was opposed to everything in the Democratic Party platform. But I did feel like, he would eventually do something that I would like, just because even a broken clock's right, twice a day. And I figured he might be right more often than that. He just wasn't going to be my policy guy. And so there were some things that I felt like, his marriage, his interaction with his daughters, even though he's, pro-abortion, I would try to find something to kind of humanize it, because hating him would give me gray hairs, wrinkles, ulcers, and I wasn't willing to get any of those things for him. It's just not worth it.
Yeah.
And so there would be times where people would say, well, they're kind of just like these crazy things. And I would say, well, there's plenty to criticize him on. Look at his foreign policy.
Right.
Like, we can talk about true issues. And I think if I was hearing that from people who oppose the president, I would totally be willing to listen to that. I am listening to that. I do actually go to their sites and read some of the things that they don't like, but most of it is centered on the president being a racist, which we know he's not, him being a Nazi, which we know he's not, and him being like illiterate or unable to process enough information to be the president, which I'm pretty sure that's not the case either. I mean, he was running a multinational company for 40, 50, 60 years before he ever became the president, so I'm pretty sure he's got the mental acuity to do it. When do you think so their fantasy is to take the House back and impeach the president? At that point, do they calm down some, Graham, or do they completely go ham? Which direction would they go?
No, I don't think that. I think Donald Trump's going to be elected president again in 2020, and I think that they are going to, raise whatever they can raise, no matter what, however they can, as long as Donald Trump is the president of the United States. And kind of going back to what you said about Obama, one of the biggest things that I hear as negative criticism for me, now that we have the show and everything, is, well, where were you when Obama was in office? Well, one, I didn't have the show back then, or I probably would have said a lot more. But I served under two different presidents in Iraq, And so I went to war underneath two different presidents. I went to war the first time underneath George Bush, and I went to war the other time underneath Barack Obama. And I did not agree with everything that George Bush said. I definitely did not agree with a lot of what Barack Obama said or did. However, he was the president of the United States.
And he was your boss, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he was my boss. Right.
He was
and
the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces while you were on active duty. So you actually reported to him, and your command sponsorship when you were overseas was underwritten by him. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, and so I tell people all the time, to me, I can be bitter that my candidate didn't win the election for an appropriate amount of time, right? As an adult, appropriate amount. Like, okay, the person you wanted to win did not win. However, this person is now president, and for you to actively want that president to fail, throw it in reverse. If Hillary Clinton had won the election, let's just go there for a minute. I would have been completely mortified for our country.
Me too.
Yes. However, I would have prayed every day that she succeed, because if she succeeded, then America would succeed, right? Like that should be the mindset of every single person living in America. Why would you want the metaphorical pilot of the plane that is America to fail? Because if they fail, then they're going to take all of us down with them.
And Graham, I was not there when President Obama was first elected, and I had to make myself pray for him, because that's the wonderful thing about praying for someone. You can't hate him. If you pray for someone, you cannot hate them. And so I got to a place where I was praying for him because I would see the decisions he was making overseas, and I'd think, this is so terrible for our country. I need to be praying for him, not because I love the guy, but because he needs to make better decisions for us. And that really that was my turning point where I could get around the corner. I was still trying to work to elect someone else, and when after his first term, that all happened. And I'm like you, I didn't have a show back. When I couldn't talk during George Bush's time, I was in the military part of the time that he was president. And when it was Obama, I was not only not on active duty, I also didn't have my own show. And when I did comment, and I did try to bring some sanity to the conversation. We do what we can when we can, and I wish we could get some sanity right here, right now from the Democrats. I really do wish they would just calm down a little bit. Your show is Rant Nation. It's at CRTV, CRTV.com. Graham Allen, thank you for joining the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, it's been great to talk to you. We're going to come back. We'll take your calls at 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. We will also finish up our conversation about these mass shootings right after this. Stay there.
One of the first steps to becoming a Christian is recognizing our sinful nature. What makes this so difficult is that we have selective vision when it comes to our own issues. It's easy for me to see your faults, but when it comes to seeing my own, then my eyesight automatically gets bad. One surefire way to measure new birth in Christ is by opened eyes and a clear vision. Sometimes we can pass between having sight and having no sight because we have fallen asleep to the needs around us, or our perspective on those things that are eternal is distorted. Whatever the case, there is nothing more dangerous than having blurred vision and still thinking that it's clear. Don't measure your vision by your own standards. It will be warped and distorted every time, but rather measure it by God's standards. God desires that our eyesight remains clear. So how is your eyesight today? With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Tony Johnson. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Here's Steve Tiber.
8 Days of Hope started after Hurricane Katrina, helping people in Bay St. Louis, Waveland, Mississippi, rebuild their homes back in 2005. Since then, this faith-based ministry has gone nationwide, and we've helped out dozens of cities, dozens of areas of the country after hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding, or even snowstorms. And now you get a chance to be a difference maker. 8 Days of Hope 16. You can be the hands and feet of Jesus down in Houston from October 13th to October 20th. You can come for as little as 3 days or stay all 8 days. We provide the food and lodging. We're looking for skilled professional and people like me who are less skilled and just want to give back. For more information, go to our website, 8daysofhope.com. Click on the event, 8 Days of Hope 16, read the FAQs, and learn more about how you can make a difference with 8 Days of Hope.
Learn more and sign up to be a part of 8 Days of Hope 16 in Houston, Texas at 8daysofhope.com. That's 8daysofhope.com.
Securing America.
The school buses are rolling again, and with students back in school, law enforcement officers across the country are turning to the latest training to ensure they have the best tools available to de-escalate a real-life situation when seconds count.
So anything that the officer would do in a stressful environment, we can mimic in there, through malfunctions to realistic reloads.
Matt Cunningham with Mega Training Systems says the virtual training uses split-second use of force evaluations. Nathan Fiddle with the Gwinnett County, Georgia Sheriff's Office says the training could be helpful for teachers.
If it comes down to trying to train in a judgmental situation and discern the facts that you have at the time and be able to act upon those with the proper level of force, absolutely, it could be useful.
The training features 5 screens, surround sound, realistic video scenarios, and weapons that feel and sound like the real thing. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
All right, welcome back to the show. It was great to talk to Graham Allen. I love his perspective, and he's a kind of rising star in the movement, kind of out there speaking truth to power, especially from his perspective as a 2-time combat veteran. It's great to see that. We need more voices like that out there telling the truth and speaking to a varied group of audiences that really honestly are springing up because the media has taken control of so many. Like, just turn the TV on, and I know if you have cable, then you're already there. You already see everything that's going on. But if we unplugged, and so when we're somewhere, like we were at a hotel over the weekend, so we had regular television, we had cable, and me and the girls were watching it for a few minutes. And I was like, whoa. The commercials, now there's every commercial has a homosexual couple in it. It's like, really? Who do you think's buying all this stuff? It's regular couples that are buying all this stuff. What are you doing? So let's get back to this. I want an understanding of where we are in this country, and I'm not some angry, crazed, on here, banging my fist and screaming and ranting about this. This is a question that people are asking. Why are we having mass shootings? We have an uptick in terrorism because we have people living here who don't understand the rule of law. We have a surge in immigration, people coming from third world countries who are now in America. They have access to firearms, and they're using them to, some of them are been co-opted into ISIS. They've pledged allegiance to ISIS. Some of them are just angry. They're doing honor killings. They're doing murders. They don't like their coworkers. Their coworkers celebrate Christmas. There's a whole bunch of different reasons why people are doing these things, but it is all tied back to, in the Bible, if you look, so often the Israelites would turn away from God, and when they would, God would remove his hand of blessing. Not all the way, but sometimes they get captured off into captivity, or they'd have violence in their lands, and people would ride in and take them over and carry the women and some of the children off to slavery and marry off into other nations, and they would have to rebuild. And this was always after they'd been warned, and they'd been warned, and they'd been warned. And one of our biggest warnings that I feel like has happened in recent times is those videos from the Center for Medical Progress about what Planned Parenthood is doing with the aborted babies. And I know there was in the Christian world a collective outcry of grief and sorrow, and there was a lot of prayer and some fasting. But we have not yet come to a place where we are on our knees desperately asking God's forgiveness for contributing to that madness. Because it's not just that Planned Parenthood was selling the baby parts for a profit. It's that our research universities were buying the parts. Now we come to find out that some researcher, some Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde person has been grafting human. So it's the aborted baby parts, the cells from that onto mice, creating human mice so that they can test different things on those. That's where we are. And so while some people are wondering, well, what's going on? What's happening? Why do we have, why are the kids shooting each other at school? Well, the kids, ton of these kids are hopped up on medications, psychotropic medications to control their behavior. The original behavior control method, spanking, has been removed from so many states. You can get arrested for spanking your kid. Kids who have corporal punishment are much less likely to have the need to be medicated so they can control themselves. It's pretty amazing. And I'm not talking about some crazy, outlandish, angry parent abusing their child. I'm talking about judicious spanking given by parents who are neither angry nor screaming or yelling or even upset, and done when children are very, very young to get them to learn obedience. And not all children need to be spanked, but definitely some of them do. And once they get to a certain age, the spanking is so far behind you because you've already done the work. You've already talked to that child. You've counseled them. You've brought them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord, and you've spanked them when it is absolutely necessary, and they understand authority. And their spirit is calmed. And I've had this argument so many times with people who don't have kids, people who only have one kid. It's so much easier to control one child. But I mean, I often see people who have just that one child and the child is just running wild and they don't seem like they can control it. So maybe that's not the truth. It is absolutely necessary that the parenting job is taken seriously. And that if I remember talking to my husband's aunt, and I was like crying myself to sleep over our oldest daughter because we had decided we weren't going to be spankers because that was the way we were raised and that was just barbaric. And she said, well, I can't believe she's acting like that if you're spanking her, because she would definitely learn her lesson. She would not be screaming and having these 55-minute temper tantrums. And I said, oh, well, we don't spank. She said, oh, well, if you don't spank her, the police sure will when she's 17 or 18, because if she doesn't learn to obey you, she'll never obey authority, and someone else will have to tame her. And we went to the Lord in prayer, and we started spanking. And now we don't have to worry about that stuff. It's not something that goes on through their whole childhood. Now, I'm off on a tangent, but the point is that if something as basic as being able to swat your child on the rear end a couple of times when they get out of hand can land you in DCFS, Department of Children and Family Services, then we definitely have gone a long way away from our biblical moorings. And so, how much more do we have to see? If we won't protect life in the womb, or we're destroying babies, how can we be shocked if the babies that do survive aren't so concerned about shooting up their classmates? It's not the guns. Previous to our modern times, all kids had access to guns. Their parents had shotguns. The parents had shotguns on the back of the truck. Parents had shotguns laying around the house. Kids took shotguns to school and they had rifle club. They would take their .22 to kids hunted. Kids had access to big knives because they would hunt and they would clean game with their parents. They would hunt on their own as kids. It's not the guns. It's the people. So you've got our Senate, which is controlled by Republicans, actually working to stop Rand Paul from defunding Planned Parenthood, because that is when they lose their legitimacy. This is the conversation that we have to have. They would lose their legitimacy if they were defunded. And that is why they hold on to it so desperately, because most people don't like the idea of abortion. But the idea that the government funds it means they're like, well, it must be something that we have to support because the government's funding it. And the government wouldn't fund something that was, inherently evil. Well, of course the government would. The government used to be in favor of slavery. I mean, the government's been wrong before. It's been wrong recently. It's been wrong today. So what do we do about it? You're probably thinking, well, wow, you painted a pretty dreary picture. Sure, pretty dreary picture. But what do we do about it? Well, I'm going to tell you. I was doing some reading, and I was really, I was in my prayer closet, and I felt like, I was like, what is happening? Why are so many of these, some of these prayers we're praying, they have to be the will of God, but we're not getting an answer. Well, that's because sometimes you pray and sometimes you fast and pray. So the Bible doesn't say, if you decide you'd like to fast, then you can fast in this way. It says when you fast. It says when you give. So we're supposed to tithe. We know we're supposed to tithe because it says when you give. It says when you pray, we know we're supposed to pray, and we know we're supposed to fast. It says when you fast. So he doesn't require us to, but it's an expectation for those of us who have gotten off the milk and are in the meat. You know, we've grown on a little bit, and now we claim to be able to tell others we have to be fasting. And it's not fun, but anyone can do it. Fasting is an invitation. When you fast, your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. Matthew 6:17 and 18. Fasting is a paradox. When we fast, our bodies are weak and hungry, but our hearts become tender and more sensitive to the Holy Spirit. Now, there are 7 types of biblical fasting. And 2 more things. Fasting is a grace. We can't do it by our own strength. We need the Holy Spirit to do it. And fasting is an expression of humility, because we humble ourselves before God, because we not just admit we can't do it on our own, but we're saying we need to be spiritually broken in order to really put ourselves in the right mindset to be able to communicate with our Father. So 7 types of biblical fasting. We want to fast to experience a greater measure of the power of God in our personal ministries. And every one of us has a ministry, whether you're just watching the kids all day, and there's no just in that. That's God's work, watching kids, raising them, teaching them to fear God, teaching them to be good citizens and to be obedient. If you're working in a business, a factory, wherever you own your own business, these are all your ministry. That's where you've been placed to do God's work. And what we know is that we can fast for direction. We can fast for the fulfillment of God's promises. We can fast for the stop to a crisis, which we have a crisis going on right now. We have a few crises going on right now in this nation. Joel 2:12 through 13 says, "Now therefore, says the Lord, turn to me with all your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning. So rend your heart and not your garments. Return to the Lord your God." So God says, if you want protection or you want the end to a crisis, you can fast. And this is what the church has to do. And the church is you. If you're listening to this show, we're the church. We have to do this. Fasting for protection. Many examples in the Bible of prayer and fasting for personal protection. After the Jewish captives from Babylon returned to Israel to begin rebuilding their nation, they were in need of help. So Ezra the priest led a group of Jews back to Israel to help them rebuild Jerusalem. While they were still making preparations to travel, they took time to fast and pray, asking God for protection because the journey was dangerous. Because back in those days, your caravan would get overtaken by a band of thieves and they'd kill all the people and steal everything in the caravan. They'd take all the goods. And so they fasted and they prayed for protection, which we can do. We can fast for insight into God's end time plan. And we can fast for intimacy with God, which is the bridegroom fast, which is where we want to experience more of God's presence. And so in all of these examples, if you notice, it's because we realize that all the military might in the world isn't protecting us from an invasion of migrants from south of the border who are coming here. And some of them are just working and earning a living. And some of them are killing, raping, kidnapping, and, doing all kinds of mayhem right here in America. We want to put a stop to that. But how do we do it? So this isn't about doing a 40-day fast. I've never done one of those. But it is about committing yourself to fast on a regular basis. And while you're fasting, because without prayer, it's just a diet, asking God to deliver us, to send godly legislators to Washington, D.C., regardless of their political party. I would vote for a pro-life Democrat who wanted to defund Planned Parenthood and seal the southern border. I absolutely would. This isn't about party. It's about what they believe. And the Republicans are falling down on the job anyway. I mean, as much as I want to see them do right and stick to that party platform, they're funding Planned Parenthood. They have not strong-armed their counterparts on the other side of the aisle into funding the border wall and sealing the border. They have the numbers to do it. They could just go to a simple majority vote and use the vice president as the tiebreaker. We're sitting up here waiting for the replacement for John McCain so that we can get that extra vote to do what? We are not getting what we need from these people because we don't ask. What does the Bible say about that? You have not because you ask not. But it's not just asking, it's seeking, it's knocking, it's fasting, it's praying, it's going to that throne and getting down low, humbling ourselves, admitting that our land is full of sin. overrun by wickedness and darkness, and that there is only one answer to that, and that is the saving grace of Jesus Christ and fasting and prayer for those of us who claim righteousness so that we can bring this to the very gates of hell and take hold of the victory that is ours in Jesus Christ. That is our calling. I'm calling you out. Annas who are in this audience, you know who you are. You know who Anna was in the Bible. That was a praying woman. Married for 7 years. Husband dies, and she spent the rest of her years on into her upper 80s in the temple praying, not just for her nation, but for other people in her community. That was her legacy. And she's not one of a kind. There are Annas in this audience. You know who you are. You know who you are. It's time. It's time for us to take hold of what God didn't leave us with the Holy Spirit and fasting like, well, you know, if you feel like using that. No, he knew we'd have dark times and dark days. And that is why he left us the ability to pray and fast. And so it's also for those personal struggles, that whatever that demon is that you've been working and battling against, and you're like, I'm just not getting anywhere with this. Pray and fast on it. I'm talking about a commitment that we have to have as Christians to show the world that we really do have the keys to the buffet for the starving, for the sick, for the hungry, the lonely, the confused, everybody who's wandering around. They're looking for some kind of crystal that can do it. Have you noticed there's this big new thing about people buying crystals, and if you can't afford to buy crystals, you use some borax and some food coloring and you make your own crystals at home, and then you can sit with the crystals and cross your legs and do a little finger thing, and and the crystals will give you calm, they'll give you energy. The certain crystal can represent this or that. It's bunk. That's garbage. There's no crystal. There's Jesus. And for people who are, I don't believe in that. Well, good for you. You'll get there. Get on out the way. Let the rest of us who do believe get down to the basics that we know. We know what works. We know that God's word is true. That when he says something, he's waiting on us so he can perform it. He's called us forward for this work. And all we have to do is follow what he said. I know we can do it. You're not listening to the show by accident. We have to fast and pray so that we can make a difference in our nation. Let's do that. We'll be back with Hour 2 right after these messages from One News Now.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
Being there is half the battle. 1milliondads.com exists to help Christian fathers to be present and intentional in the lives of their children. Our hope is to wake up the fearsome wonder that is the mighty man of God and restore him to his role as leader, teacher, and counselor. Visit 1milliondads.com. 1milliondads.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Steve. Very little is known about what led up to a Baltimore man shooting and killing people at a video game tournament in Florida before turning the gun on himself. Eben Brown reports.
Police took a few short hours to identify the gunman who killed 2 people and wounded others when firing a weapon during a Madden 19 tournament at the Jacksonville Landing Entertainment Complex in Florida.
The single suspect in this case is a white male, and this is pending confirmation, but we believe the suspect to be 24-year-old David Katz from Baltimore, Maryland.
Jacksonville Sheriff Mike Williams. Federal agents searched what is believed to be a family home in the Baltimore area. While investigators haven't shared ideas on a possible motive, other gamers say Katz started shooting after being eliminated from the competition. In Miami, Eben Brown, Fox News.
A deal to renegotiate NAFTA could be worked out as soon as today. Rachel Sutherland has the latest.
Talks have been going on to rework the North American Free Trade Agreement for more than a year, and now sources say a deal could be reached soon. President Trump tweeted over the weekend, a big trade agreement with Mexico could be happening soon. This after he told a rally in Ohio.
It's a terrible deal. We're going to either make it good or we're not going to have it.
Mexico's economy minister has said his nation won't announce a NAFTA deal until Canada is also on board. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
A new report says some United Way affiliates are helping fund Planned Parenthood. Chris Woodward has more.
The report from Second Vote, published exclusively on lifenews.com, looks at the affiliates' tax filings with the IRS and other financial documents. Stephen Ertelt is founder and editor of Life News.
That funding now is almost $3 million a year, and that's very unfortunate, and pro-life people need to speak out.
A previous report by Life News showed that United Way affiliates were giving about $2.5 million a year in 2015.
And this has been the case with the Girl Scouts and other nonprofit organizations where essentially the main organization says, well, you know, we don't have a policy supporting abortion, or we're not funding the Planned Parenthood abortion company, but obviously their local chapters are. And there are dozens of local chapters. In fact, 62 United Way chapters currently fund Planned Parenthood according to their own financial documents. This pro-life organization, Second Vote, has a full list of every single chapter that currently is funding Planned Parenthood. And so pro-life people can go to Life News, read the report, and get that further information to follow up.
AFN is seeking comment from United Way. I'm Chris Woodward.
The head of a Messianic Jewish ministry does not believe President Trump's proposed Middle East plan will lead to nothing. To explain, here's Chad Groening.
When Donald Trump campaigned for the presidency, he promised to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to its proper location in Israel's capital city, Jerusalem. He has fulfilled that promise. Now the president has announced that he will go to the United Nations late next month, where he says he will unveil his Middle East peace plan. The Palestinians say they don't want to listen because of the move of the embassy and the U.S.'s official recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Jan Markell is founder and director of Olive Tree Ministries and host of Understanding the Times on American Family Radio. During a recent appearance on AFR, she said you have to have two parties in a negotiation.
Israel really doesn't have anybody to negotiate with because presently Mahmoud Abbas is not going to cooperate. First of all, the embassy's been moved, and that was a fatal flaw that they will never forgive, ever. So no matter what's put on the table, and I can tell you Jerusalem, dividing it will not be on the table. So it's all a non-starter.
And Markell believes the president knows that it is good that he is at least making an appeal.
And I think he'll make it sound good, and I think he'll make it sound like all parties are going to try to be a part of this. But I guarantee you, once they sit down face to face, if in fact they do, nothing's going to happen. Now, you know, all of us could be wrong here, but this is how it's being projected.
I'm Chad Groening.
And U.S. agriculture officials say Cargill Meat Solutions is recalling nearly 25,000 pounds of ground beef that might be contaminated with E. coli. The beef was shipped to warehouses in California and Colorado. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com and on the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Please call your senators today. It's time to put an end to the liberals' filibuster. Tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood now. Call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Again, call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
The United States is cutting more than $200 million in aid to the Palestinian Authority. The decision comes after a review of U.S. assistance to the PA. The funding had been in question for years due to the controversial policy known as pay to slay, a compensation plan for Palestinians who attack Israelis.
The Trump administration can act as a model for all 68 nations that give money to the Palestinian Authority and to UNRWA. Maybe that will happen.
What I would say to my Republican colleagues is please explain to voters at home why you allowed Planned Parenthood to continue receiving taxpayers' funds. Please explain to voters at home why anyone would trust politicians who continue to break their promises. Republican leadership has the power to unblock the amendment tree and allow the vote. The question is, what is more important to these Republicans, saving lives or spending money?
And now, Stacy Washington.
Yeah, I'm back. And it's hour 2. Thanks for being here. Yeah, we have a lot more to talk about. We have a lot more to get into. And when I was saying Where are my Annas at out there? Men, don't think I was leaving you out. Annas, that's a type and shadow of a person. She was real in the Bible, but any person can be a person of prayer. And so just like we look to David for his excellence and we want to emulate, there's so many people in the Bible who were like, woo, I could, Lord, give me some of that. It's the same thing with her. If you want to be a person of prayer, she's a great person to read about in the Bible scripturally, but we can all devote ourselves to that lifestyle. And it doesn't mean that we turn into weird, those people. It just means that we are effective in our prayers, that they actually make things happen because we actually pray the will of the Father and that we get answers to our prayers. That's what we're looking for here. And the fasting is an element that we have kind of fallen away from. And if we want to see movement, if we want to see energy on these issues, we got to start fasting. We got to start fasting and praying together to see God's hand move. All right, we are going to have a guest in second segment. It's Ron Coleman. He's an attorney and legal scholar. He'll be on with us to talk about Michael Cohen, campaign finance laws, the whole attorney-client privilege that has been completely obliterated. And then we're going to get into some of this talk about Trump's U.S. aid decision that he just made. But right now, let's go to Jake in Arizona. Hey, Jake, thanks for holding on over the break. I'm not sure if we still have Jake. There you are, Jake. Okay, so I don't know if we still have him. So now I want to talk about this U.S. aid. So this was an issue because, first of all, the Palestinian Authority has aligned itself with Hamas. And so it's been since 1993, I think, that we've been talking about removing their aid. But instead of removing it, we have ratcheted it up so that in the last 15 years or so, we've given them over $6 billion in U.S. aid. Now, what's important about that? Well, $6 billion is a lot of taxpayer money. And Rand Paul, again, I'm back with Rand Paul. I know some people have some concerns with him about foreign policy and different things. But when someone's right, they're right. And so I'm willing to, if you're right, you're right. Just like I said about I wasn't playing when I said I would vote for a pro-life Democrat who wanted to seal the border. I sure would. Absolutely. Yes, I would. So this isn't about party. And the fact that he's a libertarian, I'm not down with the libertarian thing, but I am down with him telling the truth and his continual efforts to not just defund Planned Parenthood, but to defund the Palestinian Authority and many individuals who receive U.S. aid. He gets such a bad rap for saying that if Israel were able to take care of herself as a nation, self-sufficiency, which they have said they want, that we would no longer be required to give them aid because they wouldn't need it. He gets such a bad rap for that, like he's anti-Israel. He's not. He's not anti-Israel at all. I think he's anti-borrowing money to give to our friends. That's where he really comes down on this. So he's actually blasted GOP leaders for trying to block an amendment to defund Planned Parenthood, but he's also been at the forefront, the leading edge of this whole eliminating funding for the Palestinians. Now, why is this important? Because Palestinians actually spend millions of dollars a year paying people who blow themselves up in Israel. So if a Palestinian commits an act of terror in a westernized nation, their family gets taken care of by the Palestinian Authority. And they use some of the money that they get from America to do that. So they get their money from three sources. One source, obviously, is U.S. aid. So Trump cut 1/3 of the U.S. aid budget to them, which amounts to $200 million. Here's Rand Paul talking about it in Cut 3.
Palestinians are crying foul after the U.S. announced it's cutting $200 million of aid to Gaza and the West Bank.
The United States of America and President Trump's administration are blackmailing and putting pressure on the Palestinian people. We were completely expecting it under the policy of blackmail and threats that the United States of America practices.
The move comes several months after the U.S. slashed more than half its funding to a UN organization that aids Palestinians, known as the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. That, on top of Washington's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital and its opening of an embassy there in May, has escalated tensions between the U.S. and Palestinians. According to a senior U.S. State Department official, this latest funding decision, made at the direction of President Donald Trump, takes into account the challenges the international community faces in providing assistance in Gaza, where Hamas control endangers the lives of Gaza citizens and degrades an already dire humanitarian and economic situation. But Palestinian leaders claim the measures are weaponizing humanitarian aid to force them back to the negotiating table with Israel, as the U.S. tries to put together a peace proposal, one they fear will favor Israel. On the ground, the funding cuts are already having an effect, especially on NGOs in the region. Several are either reducing their operations or closing down entirely. That means not only less aid for the needy, but also no work or income for their Palestinian employees.
So here's what's funny about that. I say, they say that the U.S. is being unfair and is trying to blackmail them to go back to the negotiating table. Why do they need to be blackmailed? And, here's an easy way to keep your U.S. aid, since we're giving it to everybody for no good reason. Just stop blowing things up. It's so easy. Stop funding terror, stop doing terror yourself, and also stop going over to Israel and blowing stuff up. Stop sending kites with bombs attached to them over into Israel. Stop launching rockets into Israel. Stop all that. Make some concessions on your, so-called Palestinian state, and you keep getting aid. I mean, it's so easy. Like, maybe it's not easy. Maybe it's just something you have to do, killing other people. Like, it's just a thing that you can't stop doing easily. Maybe. I don't know. But I'm of the mindset that when they say it's blackmail, what they mean is, how dare you attach strings to all that free money you've been giving us? We just want the free money. We don't want to do anything for it. Just give it to us. Hill hands are still out for the other money, though, right? So they've only had a third of their U.S. aid budget cut. They also get money from the UN, which is primarily funded by the United States. Our UN funding amounts to 22% of the total budget, but the actual entity, there's a specific committee within the UN that funds this particular country, Palestine, and the 40% of the funding for that committee comes from the United States. So once again, borrowing $1 million a minute or an hour, some astronomical amount, borrowing all that money so we can pass it on over to the Palestinians, some of it, who are then using it to commit acts of terror against our ally and against us. So I just don't see how it's a problem. Like, how is this an issue? So if you want to call and talk about it, 866-963-2037. I just get so annoyed that this has taken so long to get done. Again, why do we have so many people working for us, on both sides of the aisle, who don't just absolutely get outraged at the idea that we're funding this? How do they not just say, you know what? It's one thing, like we have actual soldiers that have been killed by Hamas, soldiers that we've even had people killed in Israel, killed by these people, and then, knifed to death, one of our troops, and Hamas then gave the family like $1 million. And so we know this happened. And instead, we're still giving them money. And so they're like, well, you heard the clip. The clip that I found, I didn't want to do a clip where it was just someone else talking about the same. I found a clip that's an actual news clip from an organization. It's not one of our big networks. And that was a clip that was played internationally. And so they're presenting it much more from like a neutral standpoint. Like, look at what the Americans are doing. Here's what the Palestinians have to say about it. Well, I actually think it's kind of odd that they get a perspective at all. They're like kids getting allowance money. Their country's so jacked that we have all of our relief agencies in their country, and our USA dollars go to our relief agencies and other relief agencies that are set up by other countries in their country. So we're actually over there not just giving them the money, but we're taking care of them lock, stock, and barrel. All of the, like they're saying now people won't have jobs because some of their jobs were funded by our USA dollars. I'm sorry, what right do you have to American taxpayer dollars for your job? Can't you create your own job and fund it with your own currency? Before you start talking about you need your own Palestinian state, how about that thing you're working with now? You just run that okay for a couple years. Could you even get 12 months worth of running that thing on your own before you start hollering about needing we need part of East Jerusalem? For what? What can you do with it? If we don't give you any money, what could you do? If we said you can have a part of East Jerusalem, but we're not giving you any more U.S. aid, no more UN aid, you ain't getting any more aid at all, you just got to run your country on your own like everybody else. We don't get any aid from the UN. We run our own country. You run your own thing, and then come holler at us if, you know, if anything like jumps off war-wise. But other than, you know, go do your own thing. No help. Well, they would be like, well, we can't do that. We want Eastern Jerusalem, but we don't want to actually pay for it ourselves. We don't want to take care of it ourselves. We don't want to run our own country ourselves. We don't even want to be able to do anything on our own. We need you to do everything for us. Create the jobs, fund them, create the relief agencies, fund them, everything. And all we're just going to do is keep hurling rocks and bombs into Israel because it doesn't have a right to exist. What am I missing here? Why do they get any money from us? Why do they get any help at all? Why do we allow them to have peace talks with Israel when they can't even fund their own country? They're a chief exporter of terrorism, and they refuse to acknowledge the fact that Israel, I even hate the terminology that we use. We want them to admit that Israel has a right to exist. How about just admitting that it exists and it's not actually anything that you can do anything about? Also, how about if you just stop talking like if you say it doesn't have a right to exist, that actually changes anything? That's like me saying the sky doesn't have a right to be blue. It's still going to be blue, whether I believe it has a right to be blue or not. It's not about me admitting it, although it would help people think I was more sane if that was my belief. People would want to hear an admission of that because they'd be like, okay, she's getting closer. But how are we even having a negotiation between Israel, the nation state, and this, you know, group of people when they don't have the ability to run their own country? Even if Israel said, you know what, forget it, just take all this stuff, just take it, then they would probably come to America and say, now we need more aid money because now we have our own country, but we just still don't have any money. How about y'all make a country first that actually makes something, exports something, actually has a legitimate form of government and is not a state sponsor of terror, doesn't commit terroristic acts? Then you can ask Israel if they would like to give you something. And if Israel says no, instead of you acting like it's a reason to hurl bombs or anything, you just go back over to where you belong and keep working on your country. Or ask one of the other Arab nations to absorb you so you can be a part of their country, become a part of Jordan or one of the other, like adjacent countries. Just go in with the other people who are of the same faith that you are and just stop all this madness. The reason this is even still going on is because we keep legitimizing them. And this is an instance where everyone always says, well, if Donald Trump meets with Korea, the dictator Korea, North Korea, he legitimizes him. Well, he's already a dictator. He at least has a country. His people are starving. They don't have electricity or food, but he has a country and he has his own borders and he has his own military. The Palestinians don't have any of that. So why are we even legitimizing it? Why are we even having this conversation? All right, when we get back, we're going to have Ron Coleman, attorney and legal scholar, on with us. Stay there.
When our health insurance renewal notice arrived last fall, my wife and I made the decision to drop our plan. With the monthly premiums and deductible, we'd have to pay $30,000 just to use it. So we did our homework and switched to Medishare. The cost savings are incredible, over $500 a month, and we don't have to pay for services we don't need or don't agree with. Then, out of the blue, she had to have emergency surgery. Scary stuff. $150,000 in hospital bills, and Medishare members took care of everything. All we paid was our small portion. I'm a doctor who's been in healthcare for 20 years, and this is one of the most impressive programs I've ever seen. Thank God she's fully recovered, and now we're telling everyone about Medishare.
Call 855-PSALM-23 to find out how much you can save on your healthcare. Medishare. Call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
A
A recent Gallup poll shows that a majority of Democrats view socialism favorably compared to a new low of Democrats who view capitalism favorably. To put this in perspective, just a few years ago, a majority of Democrats viewed capitalism favorably. Meanwhile, more than 7 in 10 of Republicans have had a favorable view of capitalism during that same period of time. The Gallup poll was quick to acknowledge that their poll does not define socialism or capitalism. As I've mentioned in previous commentaries and even in my latest book, Christians and Economics, this might explain some of the lower percentages. The term capitalism has often been degraded in the popular culture. The Gallup poll also believes that it is possible that a drop in Democrats' positive views of capitalism is related to Donald Trump's presidency. After all, Trump has been described as a free market capitalist. If you dislike Trump, then you're likely to also dislike capitalism. One last reason for the change can be linked to the prominence of socialists within the Democrat Party. Senator Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have been traveling the country speaking to crowds and endorsing candidates. Some of the proposals by Sanders that used to be on the margin of the Democratic Party are now becoming mainstream. Democratic socialists like to point to Sweden and Denmark as socialist success stories, but these countries are not technically socialist. And as I've discussed in previous commentaries, the success of these countries depended on a capitalist foundation long before the significant expansion of social programs. The Gallup poll announced that this was the first time Democrats viewed socialism more favorably than capitalism. This will affect how they vote in these midterm elections. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being here, and also for the live stream and all the different places that we're putting the program right now. It's really exciting to be able to do this and have a way for different types of listening and viewing and all of that. So really great to be doing that. And also head over to StacyOnTheRight.com, hit the subscribe button over there. Also follow on YouTube and Instagram and Twitter, wherever you'd like. We're all over the place. All right, right now it's my pleasure to welcome Ron Coleman. He's an attorney and legal scholar, and he's joining the program. So glad to have you here. I'm not sure if we have our guest or not. Do we have our guest? Okay, perhaps not. My call screening thing is down, so I have no idea what's going on with that. What I'm really interested in is I'm interested in seeing what happens in the midterm when it comes down to these kind of core issues. When we're on the break and I'm listening to this breakdown of how many Democrats are really kind of upset about socialism, or how many Americans actually think socialism is okay, especially people on the left, it's interesting because this was something that Democrats used to roundly mock, the idea that socialism could be a viable alternative for this country. Yet now we have millions of them saying, yeah, you know what, it could probably work. In the face of Venezuela being on fire and being unable to take care of itself now, and its citizens just pouring into all of the surrounding countries, just dive bombing out of Venezuela because they're starving to death. All right, so now we can welcome Ron Coleman, attorney and legal scholar, to the program. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Sure. So it's Michael Cohen and the campaign finance laws and what to expect in the future in terms of attorney-client privilege. Let's get into it.
Well, it's pretty scary. As someone who has practiced law in New York and New Jersey for a lot more years than I'd like to acknowledge, the way and the rationalization that Cohen's files were essentially made public, because remember, they were not only given access. The access to them was not only granted to the FBI and subsequently to the government, to the government through a privileged team, but also there was extensive leaking to the press. I mean, once the Fourth Amendment is blown past, I mean, attorney-client privilege on the one hand, unreasonable searches and seizures on the other hand. You can't put this stuff back in. There's something that's absolutely unnerving about what happened with Cohen, and it's so bizarre. The silence of the organized bar, the relatively pliable response of the judiciary to the request to breach the attorney-client privilege here makes it very suspicious. It certainly gives reason to believe that we don't know a lot of important things that by now we should know, or it may turn out that the reason that we don't know them is going to be something incredibly explosive that we haven't heard yet. But taking a snapshot of the way the world looks at the end of August in 2018, what happened to attorney-client privilege in the Cohen case is a travesty.
So how do we go back from that? Does it take a case that would be appealed to the Supreme Court, or how? Because it has to be that when someone does something as wrong as what I feel like happened here, where the attorney-client privilege was breached, which people have literally gotten off from murdering people because of attorney-client privilege. People, I mean, there's been horrible travesties that have occurred where if there was ever a chance that you would think this is it, attorney-client privilege has to be breached. And in those instances, it wasn't, and people who did wrong things went free. But in this case, it seems as if the ends justify the means, anything to take down Donald Trump. But can't this come back and bite Democrats? I mean, if one of them's ever prosecuted, it seems like they're impervious to prosecution. Hillary Clinton, so many of them who right now, James Comey should be brought up on charges as well. There's a ton of different people who should definitely be under threat of prosecution, and they're not. But at some point, doesn't the pendulum swing back the other way? And isn't it a Democrat who has their attorney-client privilege completely breached, and then, then it'll be a real travesty?
Well, that's the kind of thing that we've said for years. And as you pointed out in your comments, it's hardly ever worked out. I mean, the only thing that we've seen where what has been good for the goose has been good for the gander has been on the issue of judicial confirmation, and that's because that has remained in Congress and not with the judiciary. But there is unquestionably a double standard. I mean, Alan Dershowitz, no right-winger, has railed against this now for months. He's mortified by what's going on, and quite understandably. I think holding out hope for a double standard, and a hoist by your own petard kind of outcome is incredibly optimistic. And the problem here is that Cohen, on the one hand, is the most obvious person to have appealed the way things went here, but he's obviously cooperating with the people who prosecuted him. And my question is, how long has that cooperation been going on? What's the true nature of his relationship with President Trump? But in fact, I said obvious. I didn't necessarily say appropriate or correct. The most appropriate and the most correct party to have objected to what went on with the attorney-client privilege and Cohen was his client. The attorney-client privilege belongs to the client, not to the attorney. The idea that newspapers uncritically carried headlines saying Cohen flips. You can't flip on your own client. You can't flip on your own client. It's your client. I've not heard a particularly cogent argument for the application of the crime fraud exception here. Certainly nothing that's come out since the plea has suggested the existence of facts that justify the crime fraud exception. So putting that aside, because right now it doesn't seem to be in play.
Well, what is the crime fraud exception?
Crime fraud exception, broadly speaking, means there are practical limits to the attorney-client privilege. If your client says, Ron, you've been a great lawyer to me, and I just want you to know I'm going to go blow up the circus today, and I might not make it back, but as my attorney, I think you should know that here's where my will is, and, well, you're allowed to call the cops and say,
okay,
something terrible is going to happen, or someone's about to be defrauded. There has to be a certain amount of immediacy. It's not merely the case that your client says to you, I committed the crime. And that is well within the realm of attorney-client privilege.
So does this
nothing close to that.
So then does the president say, like, let's say they come out with something explosive and the president's response is, yeah, and if you'd gotten that any other way, then I'd probably be in legal jeopardy, but I'm countersuing, or my defense is that you breached the attorney-client privilege and Michael Cohen should be up on charges for dereliction of duty. He would be disbarred, or I don't know if it's derelict. I don't know what the proper term is.
He's going to prison because of the plea that he cops. Disbarment is not automatic, but essentially automatic when you're convicted for a felony, so that's not an issue. Cohen is, unless, again, there's some magical mystery that we have not been apprised of, Cohen is not an important person. He is a pawn. He's been played. Who's playing him for what purposes, I don't know. Whether or not he goes to jail, loses his lost license, shouldn't be of concern of us. This is a political operation, not a law enforcement operation. So President Trump's concern presumably would not so much be this is fruit of the poison tree. It should not have been. It's evidence that can't be used against me. You're quite right that those should be defenses available to him if any of this material were attempted to be used against him, unless for some reason he is deemed to have waived his attorney-client privilege, which has been suggested in certain ways. Certainly he didn't protest the way you might have expected when the rulings were made permitting the attorney-client material. Why he didn't, frankly, I think is one of the interesting things about this. It's hard for me to imagine an aggressive person who loves litigation, like President Trump, not sending in a pack of legal wolverines to do everything they could to prevent this from happening, to seek a writ of mandamus if the Southern District had not gone his way. It seemed very passive. So.
But why? Why would he be passive at this point? Is it that he's just biding his time because he knows whatever they have is going to mean the end of his presidency, so he wants to get as much done as he can? Or, I mean, what is the reason for that? Then
I can't imagine that it's that, because then I don't think biding his time. I think he'd be biting, kicking, and scratching to avoid the stuff coming out. No, I think it's rather. I mean, listen, things that we didn't expect to happen have happened as a result of this strange juxtaposition of relationships and loyalties. I mean, so you have Lanny Davis, Democrat fixer extraordinaire, going on all the news shows over the last week or so and announcing that the Steele dossier is garbage. And,
I saw that. I kind of laughed like that, and then I was like, wait, did he just say what I thought he said?
Wait is the dominant word here. What's going on? How is that happening? How could you have, even if you were a billionaire, ever imagined putting together enough money to get a Democrat mouthpiece like Lanny Davis to do that? He also subsequently has walked back his own comments about the Prague meeting, about the Trump Tower meeting. Mm-hmm. I don't understand it. One thing you learn when you practice, law, especially if you do litigation, whether it's criminal or civil, is that you have to be patient with respect to the revelation of information. It's clear to me we don't know everything or we know nothing. I don't understand what's going on.
Okay, so are you kind of intimating at this point that? So I know the feeling about we don't know anything, because I honestly was kind of thinking, because I've kind of put it on the back burner because I really am concerned with what the president's doing on, the 100 points that he said he was going to take care of as president. And I feel like those are much more productive items to focus on, because with the legal side, not only am I, obviously I'm not a lawyer, but I also don't think that it's even like worth my time to try to figure out what's going on when so much of what they're doing is behind closed doors. It's not like the O.J. Simpson trial where every piece of evidence, we got to see it as it was, unfurled. And so we got to kind of make up our minds as we went along and ate our popcorn. With this, it's more like, well, so now they've given some other person immunity, but we just found out that the White House general counsel has been cooperating since day one. A person who has stuff to hide doesn't have the White House general counsel cooperate since day one. Like, I just feel like he's kind of like, yep, so you've talked to Cohen, annoying, but you still ain't gonna find anything. Is that your feeling or what?
Yeah, I mean, it does appear completely spitballing here that the Cohen piece was some kind of set play, some kind of, distraction, diversion. It's so inconsequential, and the damage done. I mean, look, there is, as you know, a whole school of thought about an elaborate, the running joke is 4D chess game played by President Trump and Jeff Sessions, where this is really all plot. It's all going to add up, and all the bad guys are going to be rounded up, and it's going to, there'll be mass hangings. And okay, fine. So far, we're waiting. But I'll say this much: it's hard for me to understand how things can be as they seem, because they are profoundly illogical, and they don't add up with the man that we see, with Donald Trump. Why would you keep Jeff Sessions on this long if he were as ineffectual and uninvolved as he seems to be? You make a very important point, which is, how about the rest of the agenda? Where's it going? There's stuff that doesn't necessarily require legislative success that it seems to not being, that it does not seem to be getting acted on. I don't frankly know it. There probably are people who could tell us, but are not going to. As of right now, it is a problem, according to this fantastic, glorious concept that it's all a game and it's all a deep play, and that all the wrongdoers are going to be marched out, sometime between now and the elections. How do you let the institutions of government and the judicial system be used as a stage for a performance? The damage that's done by that only undermines further the very real sense of cynicism and skepticism that people have about justice in this country. So I hope some of this makes sense at some point. Right now, it's very hard to understand.
Well, so last year I spent some time writing for America's First Freedom. It's an NRA publication. And during that time, I spent a lot of time looking at what individual agencies were doing and how that intersected with the Second Amendment. And one of the things that has kind of gone unsung in mainstream media that I wrote about was the relationship between Attorney General Jeff Sessions, the Department of Justice, and President Trump in increasing dramatically the number of felony drug prosecutions on individuals who, some of them were committing violent crimes. And those crimes were not being prosecuted under the Obama administration. And the prosecution of those crimes went up by first 33% and then hundreds of percentage points under Jeff Sessions within like 90 days of him assuming the role. Like, he literally dropped the hammer on those prosecutions and they just ramped up. And there's other things as well. They don't get reported in the mainstream, but I just don't, I know it could be a distraction or it could really be that bad of a relationship, but I don't believe the relationship between Sessions and the president is as bad as they want us to think it is. And
hard to imagine it would be.
It really is. It strains credulity. Thank you so much, Michael, Ron. Thank you, Ron, for coming on and joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Ron Coleman, attorney and legal scholar. Great interview. Thanks for being here. We're going to be back with more right after this. You can also call in. If I missed your call, I'm sorry, 866-963-2037.
We live in a day when America's families are under attack like never before.
Buddy Smith, Senior Vice President of the American Family Association.
The war against biblical principles rages on numerous fronts. The internet, Hollywood, Washington, D.C., America's corporate boardrooms, and the list goes on. At American Family Association, we're committed to standing against the enemies of God, the enemies of your family. And we recognize it's an impossible task without God's favor and your partnership. Thank you for being faithful to pray for this ministry, to give financially, and to respond to our calls for activism. What you do on the home front is crucial to what we do on the battlefront. We praise God for your faithfulness, and may He give us many victories in the battles ahead as we work together to restore our nation's biblical
This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. Just how many genders are there? Scientific evidence has shown that our DNA is encoded male or female. There are no other designations at the genetic level. Tell that to legislators in Massachusetts. Their attempt to follow the trend in Europe of permitting a third gender designation of X on driver's licenses was thwarted by a quick-thinking Republican, State Representative Jim Lyons. Lyons knew that each amendment to a bill in the Massachusetts state legislature must be given 10 minutes for debate and 3 minutes of voting time. Instead of considering the X designation only, he added all 73 of Facebook's gender options for consideration as well. Debating all of the gender options would cause their reasoning for allowing just the one addition to fall apart. As time was of the essence, as Lyons completed amendments for 35 of the 73 gender options, his Democratic counterparts withdrew the bill. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at staceyontheright.com.
I'm Chad Pergram with the Speaker's Lobby. The House of Representatives hasn't met since July, but no big customary August recess this month for the Senate. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell plans another week of work for the Senate. Senators will debate a slate of 17 of President Trump's nominees. They range from a member on the Fed Board of Governors to an Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services, plus a host of federal judges.
Coming back to work this August was not a conventional decision, but of course there's nothing conventional about the historic level of obstruction which Senate Democrats have systematically visited upon this administration. Nominees.
But Senate floor traffic won't command the most oxygen in Washington. The majority of attention remains trained on the guilty plea of Michael Cohen, the conviction of Paul Manafort, and whether President Trump might fire Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Senate Majority Whip John Cornyn says the Senate can't confirm a potential Sessions successor. And GOP Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse says he won't vote to confirm a successor if Mr. Trump fires Sessions because he won't be a, quote, political hack. With the Speaker's Lobby, Chad Pergram, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacey on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the program. It's great to be with you today. Monday. I don't know if you guys had a whirlwind weekend. We certainly did. And I'm not going to say the name of the church, but we had the best time yesterday down in Rolla, Missouri at this church. Okay, I'm going to tell you, it's the Cornerstone Church. It was fantastic. I was expecting, obviously we're going to church, so I'm never negative about that, but I was definitely thinking, I just want to be at home in our home church and listen to our pastor, and I'm going to be so, this isn't, it's just not going to be home. But we were visiting our oldest daughter, the one you've been hearing about her. She's, in college, and she's really, she's doing a great job. And so we went down to go to church with her and to spend some time with her because my husband and our son were off to the races on their last father-son trip together through the Sunright Ministries, which our church does that trip once a year for the dads and the sons. And so they're off, zip lining, water sliding, playing basketball, because men know how to have fun when they have a retreat. They study God's word, they read a book, but they have fun. Women would have just had lectures the whole time and then a little bit of free time on our own to shop. That's what we would have had. But the men are having a good time. So we're down and we're enjoying, just some time with our daughter, and the younger one and I are there with her. And we went to this church and it was just phenomenal. It was a great service. They had a lunch for the college students after that we attended, and we got to meet so many other people there at the church. They really love those college students down there. And so it was wonderful. And we were really blessed by the service. It was, it's rare that I go visit somebody else's church and I'm like, wow, that was great. So, and we had a guest speaker at our church anyway, so I didn't miss anything. I did not miss our pastor speaking. So anyway, so now I want to talk about, we're going to close this loop with this foreign aid to the Palestinians. And so it's not that I don't care about the other foreign aid that our country actually spends. In fact, I'm going to give you a few numbers of some of the other countries that I think need to be defunded. But the Palestinian aid is of particular interest because it is funding terrorism, okay? That's what's important here. Terrorism is being funded by American tax dollars. That should never be the case. It shouldn't be a big, long appropriations process to defund entities that are using American taxpayer dollars, that are being borrowed, by the way, to fund terrorism. That should not be a problem. It should be something, literally, they just go in and vote, and boom, it's done. So Rand Paul talks this is back in 2004, just to let you know how long we've known they've been funding terrorism with our money. Back in 2004, he submits a bill to cut foreign aid to Hamas. It's number one.
Well, the stated goal of Hamas that runs Gaza is the destruction of Israel. They've now joined together with Fatah that runs the Palestinian Authority. We give them several $100 million a year of precious American money, and all I'm asking is that they say that Israel has the right to exist as a precondition to getting the money. I think that's the least we can ask. I asked for unanimous consent today to pass the bill, and the Democrats came forward and they opposed this. And my question is, why? You want to keep giving money to the Palestinian Authority and potentially to Hamas, even though they are calling for the destruction of Israel? And so this is a big battle, and I've been enjoying this battle for over a year, but I'm not done with it. I'm going to make sure that no American dollar goes to any country that is not acting in a way that is in our best interest, and to countries that don't recognize Israel's right to exist.
So you're probably thinking, whoa, so back in 2004. Yeah, so I promised you some numbers. Here's, you're going to love this. We send Sweden, let me make sure I get this right, because you guys, you have to know that this is like it's one of the most disturbing things ever. Disturbing. Okay. All right. So we give Sweden $1,269. $1,269. We give Iceland $0. We give Egypt $1,239,291,000. We give North Korea, the dictatorship of North Korea, we give them $2,142,161. They are getting shorted, obviously, because we give Liechtenstein $0, also getting shorted. Luxembourg, they get $0. Monaco, $0. Ireland, $0. Kuwait gets $112,000. I guess that's just for participation. Andorra gets $0. Burkina Faso gets $74,469,000. And what these numbers tell me is, I think some of these countries, they realize, oh, America's giving out foreign aid and we're not getting any. So they hire a lobbying firm in the United States. They pay the lobbying firm a certain amount of money, and the lobbying firm says, well, we can't guarantee you anything, but we know we can get you something. They go, they lobby, they get something for the country, and it goes into our budget, and we taxpayers just keep on working like dogs to pay these taxes. Now, for Palestine, let me find that number for you. Palestine gets from the United States, well, so first of all, what do they get it under? Because they have Pakistan, Papua New Guinea, Peru, Portugal, and Qatar. So exactly how are the Palestinians getting their money? Like, under what country name are they getting it? Certainly they're not getting it under Hamas, are they? Syria gets $916,426,000. United Kingdom, a perfectly self-sufficient, self-sustaining country. United Kingdom, $3,877,820. Why do they need money from us? Venezuela gets $9 million a year from the Americans. Vietnam, $157 million. Yemen, $305 million. $305 million. That's like a little less than $1 for every American. Eritrea gets $119,000. Germany, $5 million a year. For what? I mean, what exactly? In some of these countries, have you ever heard of Comoros? They get $1 million. China gets $42 million. We owe them money. Why don't we just apply our U.S. aid budget to money that we owe them because we borrow money from them? Iran, $3 million. Iraq, $5 billion. Ireland, $0. Italy, $454,000. The Italians are they're not getting their fair share. Kuwait, $112,000. Kyrgyzstan, $41 million. Laos, $57 million. This adds up to a lot of money. These numbers by themselves. Morocco. Why would Morocco need $82 million from America? Mozambique, $514 million. You know that's not going to the people of Mozambique. That's going to some little tin-pot dictator down there. And I still don't see a country on here that would equate to the Palestinians. So they're just getting it as a territory, because this is a list from the Daily Caller that only lists countries that are getting money. So they're not on here. Now, I told you the $200 million is 1/3 of their U.S. aid. We know they're getting about $650 million in that pot. The question is, why are they even getting $1? Just let it implode. Let it go on its own. And then when they learn how to stop doing terrorism, then we come back to the table and talk about giving them some money. After we've balanced our budget and we're no longer borrowing it to give it to them. I mean, how simple is that? How easy would that be? So here is Rand Paul, last clip. He's talking about, again, no longer funding foreign aid to Palestine.
I want to thank the chairman for having this committee as hearing on the subject. As you'll recall, in 2014, I brought this subject up in Senate Bill 2265, where I offered a bill that would have cut off aid to the Palestinian Authority unless they were to renounce all ties to terrorism and payments such as these. The chairman blocked me at the time from bringing it forward in the full House or the full Senate, but said it would be a good committee hearing. And so I'm glad we are having a committee hearing on the subject, not my bill, but the subject, and I'm supportive of the subject. I think, though, that I tend to agree with Senator Risch in the sense that, you beat around the edges and say how much we love Palestinian Authority for all these other things we have to have for stability. We're going to cut some little bit here, maybe. And people are worried, oh, gosh, if we cut any of their money, they'll be mad. People sense weakness and, cut it all. Cut every last penny of it. If you want to restart some of it, restart it when they change their behavior. That would be the strength that actually would show something. But nibbling around the edges, they sense your weakness, and they will continue to do it. They've been doing it forever. But I guess the thing that really galls me is from Ambassador Shapiro's testimony that the Knesset is considering withholding tax revenue commensurate with the prisoners' payments, although it's far from clear that it will reach final passage. If the Knesset can't even withhold the tax money, some amount of money equivalent to what the payments are, my goodness, what kind of message are we sending? So if we've got a message, if the Knesset's listening to us, for goodness sakes, you've got to do at least that first step if you object to people paying the families of people who are killing innocent citizens. So, both sides need to act.
Okay, so he's right. Now, I'm going to pivot over to another topic, and we have adequately covered that. I think it is one of those questions that when someone comes up to you, be they Democrat, Republican, Independent, and they say, I'm running for X and I want your vote, and they're going to D.C., so some federal office, the first thing you ask them is, well, will you vote to defund Palestine? Will you vote to defund any entity that doesn't deserve our money? Will you vote to reevaluate all U.S. aid funding, all foreign aid? And if they say, oh, well, that's just a drop in the bucket, then I can't vote for you. You don't have proper spending priorities for me. But thank you for stopping by. Thank you for asking for my vote, but I won't vote for you. That's how we get these people to come in line on these spending issues. Same thing with the pro-life issue. So where are you on defunding Planned Parenthood? Well, I think it could be done, but sorry, I can't vote for you. You either believe in defunding them or you don't, period. Thanks for coming by. That's it. Where are you on religious liberty? Do you think that any person who has some newfound right or feeling or sexual proclivity should be able to force a business to do something for them as opposed to going and finding another business to do it? If they say, well, some people need rights. Sorry, I can't vote for you. Thank you for stopping by. Bye-bye. That's how we have to get as Christians. Instead of saying we're with this party or that party, we need to say, child of the king, voting priorities, biblical worldview. What? Voting priorities are the biblical worldview. If you are some kind of atheist, then you possibly cannot have a biblical worldview. So no, sorry, can't vote for you. Is it a religious litmus test? No, it's just making sure that people that we send to Washington, D.C. with a biblical worldview will actually do what they promise. All these other people, they don't have a biblical worldview because if they did, they would feel bad about lying to us to get our votes. They would feel bad about lying to us to get our political contributions. That's what would be the thing. Now, I don't know if you guys remember. Last weekend, Coulter came on the show to talk about her new book. And in her new book, which I have been subtly plowing my way through, she talked about this lie that the president said that Nazis were good people. Now, I thought I'd covered this before, but I want to be on the record so that I remember covering it, so that it's forever enshrined in the podcast. I want to make sure it's been covered. The president did not say that the Nazis were good people or the people who were there who were white supremacists were good people. He said there were good people on both sides because the original protest that turned into a white supremacy rally was organized by a group of people who got a permit, who were protesting the removal of 2 statues. They weren't white supremacists. They were regular, everyday Americans who just don't want to see statues pulled down because they feel that that is erasing American history. Now, whether or not you agree with Robert E. Lee statues remaining up, people who want them to remain up have every right to get a permit and protest. They're not white supremacists. They simply want the statues to remain. The people who showed up to protest and be a part of the rally that was organized were white supremacists. So there were white supremacists there. But when the president said there were good people on both sides, he wasn't talking about white supremacists. He was talking about the original protesters who got the permits, who actually were just regular Americans who didn't want statues removed from their town. On the other side, the counter-protest was organized by Antifa. There are a bunch of violent thugs who are out to tear down cities, burn cop cars, and beat people up for wearing Trump gear. Those people were on the other side. So when he said there were bad people on both sides, he was referring to the white supremacists on the right who were with the people who were protesting that they wanted the statues to stay up. And then there were the Antifa protesters who did not get a permit. They showed up and started raining down violence, and they were the ones where he said there were bad people on both sides. So there is at no point a moment in which Donald Trump said that white supremacists were the good people. He said the people who wanted the statues to stay up were the good people. This is so simple and easy to understand. I could explain that to a 5-year-old and they would get it. And I'm still going to have somebody in the chat room on one of these pages talking about how, well, the president said white supremacists were good people. He didn't say that. Not only did you not hear him say that, all you've done is sit up and consume copious amounts of lie TV. And now you're regurgitating back out what you've heard. No thoughts have occurred. The thoughts, the actual sounds that you heard went in your ear and went straight to the back of your throat so you could just push them right back out. You haven't thought about anything. Stop saying lies. I'm not going to put up with it over here. I can actually think. When things come in my ear, it goes around up in this area and synapses fire and thoughts occur. And then if I don't understand what I heard, I go research it. Paper, books, the internet, it's available to you too. Instead of running around spouting lies about Donald Trump, criticize him for the things that he's actually done that you don't like instead of making stuff up. I mean, I have totally had it with that. I'll be back with you tomorrow. God bless.